Oh wait, I'm going to start like this. I think I'm going to try and start like that from now on. Try to match whatever image I pre-stream with. And excellent. So the stream is coming through. Hello, everybody. Welcome, class BC1-1801. Welcome to week 2. So I quickly wanted to answer Grady in the chat. You were mentioning about OBS, and if you weren't here last time, last stream was my first stream with OBS, and I didn't set it up correctly, and you could not see my mouse. So you could see where I was clicking, but you could not actually see the travel of the cursor, which was surprisingly confusing and hard to follow. So yes, to answer your question, Grady, I switched it with Mac. There is some sort of OS issue that it cannot project the mouse when I'm capturing a window. So now I'm simply capturing the whole display and just trying to stay organized, keep what I want to be seen in the front. So that is what's going on, which reminds me, I need to put this chat somewhere else. I'm going to put this over here to the side so I can keep an eye on you guys, on what you're saying. All right. Okay. Let me switch around my user interface and we'll get started. Yeah, welcome to week 2. I'm pretty excited about this. Someone else, Tony, I believe you mentioned in the chat, it's your first time here and you were excited. I'm so glad to hear that. I am real happy. Just ask my wife anytime before one of these streams. I get all pumped up. And I do listen to Jock Jams in my head. So I hope some of you guys had that going on as well. But before we get started with week 2, or actually the first thing I want to do with week 2 is talk about week 1, which was awesome. It blew my expectations out of the water, frankly. We had 37 homework submissions to my last count. And I don't know what I expected. I did not expect that many. And the community thread was lit, as I've heard the young people say. I mean, I could show you right now. We are at, let's see if I can look at the community. This thread alone has more activity by more than double than any previous thread that we've had. I guess since 6 launched. I can't remember if we migrated stuff. But before this was a canine contest, and in week 1 of a 4-week class, we already have a ton of activity. And I'm just really excited to see that. It seems that some people are getting a lot out of the class. Well, they're getting stuff out of the class. I won't say a lot yet, but that is awesome. I love to see that activity, and I love participating in that activity, checking it every day, and it's just been awesome. So the spectrum of user experience in our class has been cool to see. I've been asking with each homework submission, like, what's your background with Blender or 3D? And we have people all over the spectrum, from transitioning to other software to Blender. We have complete beginners, and we have long-term members of CG Cookie who have been to a lot of the streams, and you guys are sticking around, and I wanted to shout out to you guys. You have been super helpful. You've been commenting on people's homework submissions. You've been giving advice, answering questions. You've done exactly what I asked you to do in the first week, and you have become a very important part of the class. I'm glad you didn't just think this is for beginners. I'll check back next month or whenever we're doing the next one, which, hint, I'm thinking about March, going ahead and doing another class. But that's going to be more intermediate to advanced. But anyway, I'm really appreciative of you guys helping, sticking around, and being that resource. Thank you so much. That has been awesome to see. And yeah, the encouraging comments, I mean, that to me is above and beyond. Like, it's one thing to give advice and answer specific questions, but not say anything about people's homework. But you guys are saying things, specifically Grady. I see you a lot in there. Scott, aka Old Dog, I see you in there a lot. So thank you. This class is awesome. And this first week has just pumped me up. I was already pumped about classes, but seeing this kind of interaction is hyping me even more. So thank you for an awesome week 1. I look really forward to this week and the coming weeks. As far as homework submissions, I did have a favorite, and I wanted to give a thumbs up to Katerina Novikova for this isometric primitives-based scene. It's really, really cool. It's stylish. It is clearly primitives. The only thing I might point out is that there look like triangles in that picture on the wall, that could not be more nitpicky. It's awesome. You did an excellent job. It was really fun to see this one. So great job with that. Everyone did awesome. If you didn't notice, everyone got A's or A pluses above A. So that was intentional. I wanted to keep it very simple. It would have been pretty difficult to fail to get anything less than an A on this first week's homework. That might be changing in the coming weeks because I do want to be a little more constructively critical as we get into more of the skills involved with modeling. But all the submissions were awesome. You each did exactly what I asked for, so thank you for that. And thank you for submitting. That was really, really fun to see. Along with the homeworks, I want to shout out to Zolt, and you're in the chat. Thank you so much. You took it upon yourself to document everyone's homework submission, the author. You gave it an identifier, a title, and you gave it a grade. And beyond that, you actually created this spreadsheet that I now have access to, which has the page number of the community thread in addition, so I can find it very quickly. And thank you for that. I mean, I kind of wanted to do that, but I didn't. I started it when I got like beyond 5 submissions. I'm like, this might be hard to keep track of and, comment and keep a tight pulse on things. And so I kind of gave up on it, but to see that you have done this, that's a huge help. I can't believe you volunteered your time to do this. And I mean, as quickly as you put it together, you seem to have way more admin skills than I do. I'm not good at that stuff. So thank you very much. I'm going to try, and hope you don't mind me asking to keep track of this the whole month, because at the end, this will be a report card for people. And I think that's going to be really cool to end the class with. So thank you, Zolt. Really appreciate that. And yeah, so to the topic of this week, the focus of this week, we are leaving the simple, comfortable shire of object mode and navigating the viewport, the absolute essential things that you need to interact with Blender and a 3D space, a 3D program. You should be comfortable with that now, calling that the shire, so to speak. And we're leaving that to journey out into the wide world of mesh modeling. I call it wide in a world because it's kind of endless. You can build whatever you want as long as it's a physical form. You can build that with mesh modeling. So from object mode into edit mode, things get a lot more fun, more complex, but primarily a lot more fun with a lot more potential. So the week 2 agenda, your assignment in terms of courses to, pre-recorded courses to watch are the Mesh Modeling Fundamentals course and the Modeling with Modifiers course. Both of those are by Jonathan Williamson. He is a retired but excellent Blender tutor from the earliest days of Blender tutoring. So excellent courses, watch those, brush up on those skills, and then the homework is going to be to model 1 to 3 mesh edited objects. So 1 to 3, depending on how quickly you make it through the courses this week and how quickly you're able to get comfortable modeling. You can either do 1 or you can do 3. I would leave that up to you, whatever you feel challenged to accomplish. So, and with that, I'm going to be, that opens up a door to be a little more critical. Maybe we'll see some B's, maybe some C's, but I have faith in you guys. You'll probably impress me way beyond my expectations. So that's what you're doing this week. And let's talk about mesh modeling as a concept. So mesh models, it is the oldest and most popular format of digital 3D model. Think of geometry class in high school when you were going over, polygons, that you probably use that term, or quadrilaterals and triangles, circles, and all those things, especially triangles that have like definitive points and quadrangles and stuff like that. Quadrilaterals, quadrangles. Think of that as 3D polygon mesh models, except it's in 3 dimensions. So it's probably a little more complex than what I remember in high school. But this is a very geometric format for presenting a 3D model. And it has a few names. Polygon modeling, sometimes shortened to poly modeling. It's also called box modeling. And then I added retopology, which we talk a lot about here at CG Cookie, because it is a form of mesh modeling, but a very specific form, and it has a specific use case. that we employ a lot. And let's see, I'm looking at the chat. I see a question. Is it possible for us to, running ahead of time, but is it possible for us to have been here since the first lesson to also participate? You haven't been here. Yeah, absolutely. I don't see, yeah, I mean, I can't think of why I would say, no, you need to leave. But, you know, ideally, the people who are here from the beginning to the end will, you know, this is going to be a linear learning flow of sorts of education curriculum to intake. But if you're picking up on week 2, that's fine, especially since this is a beginner's course. If you have any experience in Blender, you'll be able to pick up right here with the mesh modeling stuff. So that's not a problem whatsoever. Welcome, in fact. So, okay, back to mesh modeling. In my opinion, it is much less artistically intuitive as a form of 3D modeling. Going back to the geometric nature of it, the way I describe it, it's as if a computer developer tried to create a system that artists ended up using. Okay, so I don't actually know this for a fact, but I'm sure that it's true. I imagine back in the 60s, 70s, probably 60s or 70s, some computer guy realized that you could visualize a 3D environment, a 3D space within the computer, and started building tools to do that. And then later down the line, maybe in like the 80s, an artist discovered that that could be used for artistic visualization and as a medium, an artistic medium. And so because of that, polygon modeling, being as old as it is less artistically intuitive. It's more technical. And because of that, when I got into 3D, I wanted to use it purely for art. And so it was a bit of a learning curve to learn all these technical terminologies for the operations and to make it do what I wanted artistically. So just wanted to say that to you. If you're here for the art side of 3D modeling, polygon modeling can be a little bit of a learning curve. So it's also really good. It's amazing for hard surface shapes. And I said bad, but then I crossed it out. It's less good, because it's still very relevant, for organic shapes. Well, okay, now that I said that, it's less relevant for organic shapes in my opinion, but it's not a bad form of modeling. I don't mean to imply that. So what I mean by good for hard surface, less good for organic is that think of anything man-made. So for example, this, what is this called? A coaster for a drink, like that's man-made, has very sharp square edges, straight lines. The mouse right here, this was made by man. It's not straight lines, but it's hard surface. It is like nature. You never see these growing on trees or anything like that. So polygon modeling is great for man-made things, cars, boxes, desks, houses, stuff like that. And sculpting, which we're going to talk about next week, that is best for organic shapes like faces, animals, trees, things that nature created. So with that said, polygon modeling is not as good for those organic nature things. It can be done, and it was done like that for years, but now we have tools that are much better, and we're going to be talking about that next week. But so that's kind of an overview on mesh modeling. And okay, I see a question mark in the chat. Edwin Catmull. Yeah, so Pierrico mentions Edwin, is it Edwin? Edmund? Yeah, maybe it's Edwin. Wow. I knew it's Ed Catmull, so maybe I didn't know the rest of his first name. But yeah, Catmull Clark is a famous term used to describe smoothing of polygon objects. So yeah, it goes way back in the decades. Anyway, we'll talk about that as well once we get to the actual demonstration. But that's kind of mesh modeling. I should say this: a mesh model is a thing, and then mesh modeling is the workflow to create the thing. And so, in the next slide, this is just examples of mesh models, and it really can be used for anything. Most formats in 3D, if it's a physical form, is going to be a mesh model. There are other formats like NURBS. And there's what Metaballs is in Blender, but by and large, you only see mesh models. And so we have Chainsaw, like that's a great example of a hard surface man-made object that's perfect for polygon modeling, and that was that's from a user in our gallery. And then also from a user in our gallery, we have this car model, which is almost photorealistic. It's an excellent model, excellent rendering, excellent materials, but it's a polygon model. And also from a user from the gallery, if I didn't already say that. And then finally, characters. Like, I wanted to say that characters are still, organic shapes are still polygon models, but rarely anymore I see people doing polygon modeling to generate their character. Usually it's a sculpt plus retopology workflow. But the point is, it's still a mesh model. And then since they're mesh models, every single one of those models is broken down into 3 components. You have vertices, you have edges, and you have faces. Vertices are the simplest form. They are the points that connect 2 or more edges. One or more edges. And then your edges are connecting 2 verts. It's the line between 2 verts. And face is when you have, I'm trying to think of how to say this, when you have a loop, a closed loop of edges, the space in between is filled with a face. And so the cube here is used to visualize that very easily. Elmar says, for the longest time he called metaballs meatballs. That's a fair mistake. Yeah, I'm sure other people do that too. So Michael, you asked, would rocks be better in sculpting? Yes, I would do rocks with sculpting. Like if I was creating a cliff scene or a cave, I would sculpt that personally. Again, that's nature generated. So in my head, nature doesn't create in straight lines. And I feel like that's a quote from somewhere, something famous, but we men create in straight lines often. And so that's why it's good for polygon modeling. Organic stuff is good for sculpting in a general sense. Not to say you can't sculpt a car design or anything like that, but we're kind of, we'll get there. All right, so mesh components, these are very important because when you're poly modeling, this is how you interact with the model. You're going to be pushing and pulling verts. You're going to be pushing and pulling edges, faces. You need to get comfortable with these 3 components. You'll be switching back and forth between them often. But it's simple. It's kind of interesting to think of complex models like this as really just boiling down to a set of vertices, edges, and faces. But that's really all it is. So I attempted to define mesh modeling as the art of manipulating verts, edges, and faces into a purposeful 3D shape. That is what mesh modeling is all about. Now, so that's the first thing that I want you to focus on this week. That's the first thing I want you to understand. Second thing is modifiers. Now, according to the Blender manual, modifiers are automatic operations that affect an object in a non-destructive way. With modifiers, you can perform many effects automatically that would otherwise be too tedious to do manually and without affecting the base geometry of your object. So that was fairly technical, but it's actually a really good definition. I don't think you could really fit it in fewer words. But the key to modifier and why I want to do it this week is that it can work so well in concert with polygon modeling. It can make your job a lot easier because it can, like it says, automatically perform tasks that would be way too tedious to do manually. And I'm going to show you an example of how. That's what I should do. Let me just try and explain modifiers if it's a little hard to understand with an example. That's going to be this one right here. It's a tire example. We have an exercise around this, and I've been seeing some comments lately that it's a little confusing. It's a kind of a big jump to go from the modifier course all the way to this as an exercise. So I want to cover that in this live stream. But first, I want to show you the power of modifiers. You know, it looks, I mean, it's not a terribly complex model, but you know, it has the treads, it has the general shape of a tire. But when we break down the modifiers, go back down to the simplest form, this is all the model is. This tiny, weird kind of sliver of it's really a cross section of the overall tire. And so if we go through the modifiers, hopefully you can see their power and the black magic that they are. The first one is an array modifier, and all it does is duplicate however many duplicates I define in a specific axis. And so we've got a string of this duplicated base mesh The second one is a curve deform modifier. And what it does is take what's underneath it, and this is a little visually confusing. Think of the stack in Blender as a list on a piece of paper. So you start with number 1, 2, 3, and 4. Even though 4 comes after 1, and we call it a stack, technically 4 is like on top of 1 and on top of 3 and 2 as well. So it's a little confusing, but at the top of the list is the first modifier, and the second one builds on top of the first, third on top of the 2 before it, that kind of thing. So the second modifier conforms this array shape to another shape. Now, the shape it's conforming to is hidden at the moment, but it's this circle object. And it's a Bezier curve. It's not actually a polygon curve, but this particular modifier requires it be a Bezier, not a mesh circle. But that's what the second modifier is doing. Third modifier is mirroring to the other side and giving that to us for free. So you can see how that's just giving us symmetry, generating that other side of the geometry. And then subsurface is the last one. That is going to smooth everything out. That's using the Catmull-Clark thing that I just haphazardly mentioned a few minutes ago. One of the pioneers of computer graphics, Ed Catmull, who is like either head of Pixar or CEO of Pixar. I can't remember exactly his role of Pixar, but he wrote that initial code that allows us to smooth our low poly models into high poly smooth results. And so anyway, I love this example for modifiers because it's crazy that this tiny weird sliver of a model ends up like this, and we did so little work to get there compared to doing this by hand, each part by hand. So modifiers are awesome. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, great, yeah. Sorry, I thought I didn't switch OBS, but because I'm using display, you see what I'm seeing. You see me even switch my app right there. Okay, great. So you saw all that. Sorry, that was my baby boy throwing his 2 cents in there. But okay, yeah, so that's what a modifier is, and we're going to talk about that. First part of the demonstration of today is going to be, oh, it's already been 20 minutes. First part of the demonstration is going to be mesh modeling a simple object, and then I'm going to show you how to build that tire to hopefully get you kick-started on the modifier stuff. Awesome. Have I missed anything in the chat? It looks like statements more so than questions. So it looks like some good advice is probably being passed in and out through there. Awesome. All right, so the goals for this week, what I want you to focus on, again, I've already said this, but understand and practice mesh modeling. That's leaving object mode, going into edit mode, and pushing and pulling our verts in every which way, and getting comfortable with that idea. And then understand and practice modeling with modifiers and letting modifiers do the work for you. That's the idea. It can be confusing to get used to, but man, are they powerful and open up a wide world to you. Awesome. Okay, so that's all I have for the slides. We're ready to get straight into the demonstration. Yeah, nothing to answer in the chat, except I did have a couple requests for cutting holes in meshes, and I'm trying to think when the best point to do that would be. Maybe towards the end of this first demonstration, the mesh modeling. So I haven't forgotten that, and I want to go over that with you. Oh, but there is another thing. I almost forgot this too. So I'm going to start a new scene and quickly go over snapping, because that was asked earlier in the week, earlier last week, and it was hard to explain in text, and so I wanted to go ahead and share this out. I forgot who it was, but someone was trying to basically put objects, like, take squares and line them up directly beside each other, and he or she knew that was done with snapping, but didn't really know about snapping, and so I wanted to share really quickly because I can understand why that would be necessary. It is a very powerful function. So snapping in object mode, and it also works in edit mode, but it has to do with this magnet icon down here at the bottom of the 3D header. And by default it's off, but if we hold Control, even though that icon doesn't light up, we are able to snap. If I start moving this and I'm holding Control, okay, this is not holding Control. When I hold Control, it starts snapping to the grid, or it's not the grid actually, it's the increment right here, which is set to the grid units. And so if we wanted to snap, say, to vertices, which maybe makes more sense, if I have a duplicate box over here, and if I wanted to set it on top of this other one, I would, try and position it manually. But then if you're kind of a perfectionist or just like a computer person and you like things to be perfect, it can annoy you to think it looks like it's on top of the box, but is it really? And so you would want to snap it to be perfectly on the box. And the way you do that is with vertex. Well, the way I'm going to do that is with vertex snapping. You can also do it with edge or face. But hit G to move this. I'm going to constrain it to the Z axis by hitting Z, hold Control, and then when I hover my cursor over to a corner, a vertex, you'll see it snaps. And it can do it to any of the top ones. It can do it to the bottom one. But there's something to talk about there. So if I start with the box above the other box, then when I hit G, Z to move it down and hold Control to snap it, it's going to snap to the top of that box. But if I start with it here, it's also going to do that. Okay, what was I thinking it was going to do? Well, the default behavior is closest. Sorry, I just confused myself. So if I come down from the top and hold Control, it's going to snap there. But also if I come from the top and snap to the bottom, you can see that it's snapping the bottom of this box to the bottom of the other one. That's what I was trying to say. And the reason it's doing that is because it's using the closest method. So instead of snapping, for example, the top of the face, like why is it not choosing when I hit G and Z, why is it choosing the bottom of the box instead of the top of the box to snap? It's because it's the closest in proximity to the other vertex as I snap to it. That's why it's doing that. So that's how I like to snap. Closest works really good. And let's see, it also, I'm trying to think if it can work with, just getting used to practicing with closest is, you can do it from any angle, but I'm trying to think how deep do I want to go into snapping, because I might use that for some of the demonstration as well. But you can rotate and snap. Now I'm not sure that wouldn't really be relevant here so much, but you can snap. You can see me rotating and snapping, but this isn't a situation where that would be necessary. Okay, let's see. So there's a question at least. Man, I love that you guys are so talkative. I just hate to think that I'm losing track. So keep talking, answering each other and doing stuff. But forgive me if I end up missing questions. Just say it again. I'll see it eventually. Maybe that's good enough for snap. But in object mode, the origin will snap. Never seen that. Okay, so Pierco maybe snaps more in edit mode than object mode. Okay, cool. I think we're going to stop there with snapping. If whoever asked that question needs more, let me know. Maybe give me some context about how you want to snap, and I'll be happy to show you. The actual demo I wanted to go over is this. Oh, I had a coffee cup earlier. That's what I want to model, is a coffee cup. And I think that's a good model to get your feet wet with mesh modeling. It's simple, but it also teaches you some really core ideas behind box modeling, poly modeling, mesh modeling. Sorry if I go in and out of the terminology. I tend to use them all. All right, so we're going to start with that. I'm going to delete these two boxes here. And in general, it might make obvious sense to you if you're going to model a coffee cup, start with a shape that's similar to that, which would be and I imagined all of you saying cylinder to yourself. So yes, it's a mesh cylinder right there. So I'm going to add that, and right away, before I do anything, move it or do any other operation, I want to designate an amount of vertices, which means how many sides essentially does this cylinder have. And I want this one to have 14 because a couple reasons. I've already tried this once, and I know that 14 is the number I want, and I'll tell you why when we get there. Let me make sure that was the right number. yeah, the reason I wanted it is I want one of the sides to face directly in one of the axes. So 14 is good. It's not, one of the faces is not facing directly in the Y, but it is in the X. So that's one reason. And then the other reason is you want even numbers, generally speaking, because even numbers in mesh modeling is an asset. Once you start adding odd numbers, things get a little weird. So it's dependent on, I guess that's factors of 2. I think that's a mathematical way to describe it. Oh, great. Grady, you said cylinder. Awesome. At least one of you did. That's great. So one thing that I like to do personally is it bothers me visually to create an object and leave it at the center of the grid, because when I'm navigating around, I don't know, it just bothers me. So I like to treat the grid like a floor in my 3D space. And so the way Blender works is because of where the default place, the origin of the world, and that's where it places objects, because that's where the cursor's at, I can simply tab into edit mode on any object that I create and hit GZ1, and that will put the object on the grid floor. But doing it in edit mode leaves my object origin at the bottom of my object, and I like that. It's kind of preferential to do that. It can just be easier. Okay, for example, when this becomes a coffee cup, if I wanted to sit it on a plane, like a table, and it's floating off here in space for some reason, I can hit G, hold Control, and snap it, and it looks like the coffee cup is sitting on the table. If the origin was in the center of the object, and I tried to do that, it would snap. It would do exactly what I thought it wouldn't. So it did snap it to the floor, and the reason it did that because Blender's smarter than me, and the default closest is going to cause that. If we change that to active, then it's going to do what I thought it would do and snap. So the coffee cup's sitting in the middle. Anyway, kind of realizing one of my fundamental, habits is maybe unnecessary, but anyway, I like to put it on the grid floor. That's just my preference. And yeah, Blender kind of seems smarter than me in that instant, but oh well, that's cool. All right, so we're starting with the coffee cup, starting with a cylinder. Alt G, just because I'm going to make sure that that thing's in the center of the world, just feels clean, feels organized. And the first thing I'm going to do is create the interior of the coffee cup. Ryan in the chat, he's saying all primitives have a size of 2. That is true. That is the default scale. Let me, the default dimensions. Yeah. At some point I scaled it a little bit. So the dimensions up here in the in panel, it's different from scale. Scale is like, scale is relative to the object. And like if I hit S2, it's 2 times bigger than its relative self, but in the world, it's seen as 4 dimensions. So you can see the dimensions up there, and you are right, it is 2. That is the default of our objects. I don't like that I scaled that randomly. Okay, I don't see any more questions. So yeah, the first thing I want to do is create that interior. So tab into edit mode. I don't want to take for granted that this might be some of your first time going into edit mode, and how exciting that is, frankly. So when you're into edit mode, the first hotkey you want to remember is Control Tab. Okay, that is going to bring up the elements. So we have vertices, we have edges, and we have faces. And you're going to be switching between those constantly. So Control Tab, you're going to want to remember that. Alternatively, down here in the header, you can change that by clicking one of these buttons. And actually, you can, I never use these, but you can shift click certain, you can have them all on at one time. That's interesting. So yeah, I never use this. You can do faces, you can do edges. That might be really useful, actually. Anyway, you can do that. You can select what your elements are down there just by clicking one after the other, or shift clicking will enable multiple. That's wild. I just use Control Tab to go between edges, faces, and vertices. Very quick to switch that way. Okay, we do have a question. Is there a way to set up a shortcut other than Control Tab to switch between vertices, faces, and edges, like middle mouse to toggle through those selections? Let's see. You can easily change hotkeys, but I guess I don't know about that one. Select, let's see, mesh. I'm not seeing anything. That might be one of the, like, I don't know if you can change the grab. Wow, does anyone else know that? I keep forgetting Control Tab. I don't know that you can change the mesh selection, or like the component selection. I don't know that you can. If anyone else knows, learn stuff on his own stream, yes. I will admit that as a streamer, as a teacher in general, from day one, I've put this pressure on myself that I need to be the authority on anything that I talk about. And I still struggle with that, even though it's stupid. I think you guys learn a lot when I learn, and it helps the fact that you see that I'm learning. And it's just kind of prideful and pompous to think that I am the authority or whatever. Yeah, okay, I think Kaj is right. It might require some Python scripting to change that. I don't think you can actually change the Control Tab hotkey. If anyone else knows differently, please let us know, but I don't think you can. Okay, so yeah, until you can change it, if you figure out if you can change it, Control Tab, that's the way, that's a go-to for me once you're in edit mode. And from here, we can start selecting the elements that we want. Now, it's smart in Blender. I would say smarter than other apps that I've used, because Blender will automatically convert your selection to any of the other elements. So if I have two verts selected and then switch to edge mode, it has that edge selected. Now in my memory, when I used Maya, it didn't do that automatically. So that was pretty awesome. Likewise, if I alt click, which alt clicking is for an edge loop. So if I cut one in here, and I'll get to the cutting part, but if I want to select this entire connected ring of edges, alt clicking will do that for me. And let me remove that edge loops. And if I do that at the top here, that selects the face, because it's very smart in that way. And if I switch to face mode, it's got this face selected. The reason I want the face selected is because I can hit I. All right, I should probably preface, there's going to be a lot of hotkeys that I'm going to suggest you learn. But I need to also remind myself that I'm going to show you in the menu where to find that. So I is the hotkey for the inset tool, and this allows me to shrink in a face according to where it was originally. So I'm just shrinking it in and creating an edge right here, a border. Just like edges, I can select an edge loop. You can also select a face loop with Alt and clicking on the edge. You know, I'm clicking on this edge to make it go around in that direction. So now that I've got that edge selected or created, I can select the interior face, and this time hit E. Wait, by the way, mesh, and let's see, it's probably in faces, and inset faces right there. Great. I never look for it in the menu, but that's where you can find it. And in general, that as a face tool, that's where you're going to find all the face tools. And so the next face tool I'm going to use is Extrude, and that is, where is that? Where is that? By the way, if my kid yelling in there, why don't I see Extrude? Is Extrude not in there? For some reason, Extrude is outside of that menu, and it's down here. I don't know why. Another reason to learn hotkeys, try to do that. But here we have Extrude. So E, and then we'll extrude straight down by hitting Z and constraining it to that Z axis. What this is doing is creating the interior of the coffee cup, and I can just continue to pull that down with G grab key until we have the depth that we like. And so, yeah, we've got the beginning of a coffee cup, but we need a handle. That's a pretty distinguishing feature of a coffee cup. I'll take my sweatshirt off. The excitement of a stream just gets me warmer. And yeah, so the coffee cup handle, another key tool. Let's see, so far we've done inset. That one is like secondarily important. I use that one a lot, but not as much as extrude, and not as much as edge loop cut or cut edge loop. That is found also in the mesh menu. I would guess edges and cut edge loop. Where is that? Dang it, I was wrong. Man, how do they have these things organized? Maybe I'm just not able to read these as fast as I want. What's it called? This is embarrassing. I've used the tool so much I forgot what it's called. So if it's not in that mesh option, in that mesh menu, look in the tools. That's the other place to look for... Okay, there it is. Loop, cut, and slide. That's the technical name for the term. The hotkey is Control R. Very important one. You'll want to memorize that one. Control R, and that's going to bring up this pinkish purple line. You click once, it creates the edge loop, and then as you move your mouse, you can slide it to any spectrum of the face that you've cut into. So for the handle, I'm going to use this to cut the top. Let me do it first. So I'm going to cut an edge there, cut another one below it, and then do that for the bottom. Now, why did I cut those in those specific places? Is because now I have two faces that I can start to create the handle. That's all I was doing when I was cutting those edge loops. That's what I had in mind. Let me remove that grease pencil mark. And so now, remember I used 14 as my cylinder vertex count because I want to create that handle right here where it's pointed directly down one of the axes, specifically the x-axis in this case. So if I look from the front using the 1 hotkey on the number pad and then 5 to go into orthographic view, and then finally Z to go into wireframe view. That's just kind of habit. Z to, I jump in and out of there frequently to see through my model if I need to. I'm kind of realizing how many hotkeys are involved. There's kind of a lot. Wow, I can forget about that. Let me see if I'm missing any questions. Look at the toolbar, Kent. Thank you, Pierico. I feel like a real idiot for not knowing that. Finding tools in menus is one of the hardest things. Always gets to me where I try and find something and don't use it that often. Agreed. Yeah, I mean, I've memorized so many hotkeys at this point, I've taken for granted that whole thing. I'm not sure if this was answered, but I think I see the hotkey is set object mode or object mode set. I'm not sure what you mean there, Ryan. Maybe I missed something in the chat, but... So if anyone, I need to say again, if anyone needs clarification on what I'm doing, if I'm going too fast, if the fact that I just used 1 and 5 on the number pad to align a specific view, if that didn't make sense to anybody, please let me know. Please ask for clarification. I can certainly give it, and I would hate for you to just not be able to follow because I'm speeding through, what I'm used to. So now that I've got these edge loops cut and it has generated these faces in the place that I need them, I'm ready to extrude out a handle. And I'm going to do that I'm going to select this face that I want to begin extruding, and then I like to lock it into a orthographic view. And from here, I can hit extrude with the E key and start to bring it out. And I'm only going to bring it out a little bit, something like this. And then from here, I'm going to hold Control and right click, which extrudes to wherever my mouse is set to, or wherever my mouse clicks. And that is a pretty fun, interactive way to extrude, an artistic way to extrude, I would say. And I'm using, remember, if you didn't see last week, I always use left-click select in the Blender preferences. So that's why I'm right-clicking. I think if it's the default Blender, you'll be left-clicking. But I'm using right-click. And so now that I've gone this far with my extrusion, I'm ready to connect it back into the mesh. But to connect it, I need to remove what's already there, because if I fill this, for example, it's going to create bad geometry. I believe it's called non-manifold geometry. It's got a face inside another face, like this kind of thing. These faces right here, that's not good. That shouldn't happen. Just like you couldn't really, there's not really an example of reality where you could do this either. But I need to remove this face. Let me back up. And so to connect it in there, the first thing I want to do is remove the face that it's going to connect into. going to delete that. By the way, delete is the X hotkey. Can't remember if I've gone over that before, but it's another very important one. X to delete, and then choose your option. I want to delete the face. And then we can connect, just switch into edge mode. You can select one edge and then the other, hit F to fill that. Or bridge, that's another option. Grady, you mentioned that. I'll show that. One method, which I often do, is bridging. I'm sorry, I do bridging occasionally, but more so I do the filling option like this. And with the F tool enabled, makes that a lot easier, but as Grady was saying, you can Alt-click, and that didn't work, but you can select, oh, because that's a face. That's why it didn't work. Okay, so I need to delete this face that it's going into, but I also need to delete the face that it's coming from. All right, so with those two faces removed now, I can Alt-click on this border edge, and Blender is smart enough to select all the edges that border the hole, and then Shift Alt-click the other edge, because Shift-clicking is adding to selection, so Shift-Alt is adding another edge loop. And so with those two selected, I can hit Spacebar, which globally in Blender, that's a way to search for a tool, and I know this tool is called Bridge Edge Loops. Can you guys hear my kid, by the way? He's being particularly loud, and if that's annoying, I can maybe ask that he goes somewhere else to do that, but let me know if that's a little too loud, annoying for you guys. I'm glad you brought that up. What does limited dissolve do exactly? Okay, a couple questions. Let me answer some of these. First, maybe this is an advanced question, so feel free to skip it if it is, but is there a way to connect two faces through a path? I'm sure there is, and I do think that's a little complex, and I don't really know what to tell you. I would love to show you that, but yeah, I think that's going to take too much time and be too complex for this particular stream, but I'm sure that you can. And then another question from Ryan. I'm glad you brought that up. What does limited dissolve do exactly? Limited dissolve, that's in the delete menu. I've never used it. Dissolve selected edges and verts, limited by the angle of the surrounding geometry. What in the world does that mean? Limited dissolve. I have no idea what that does. I've never used it before. So that being said, I don't know what it does, but I'm sure you can get along in Blender without it. Yeah, never used limited dissolve. I can't hear over my kid. Don't worry about your son making noise. That's fine. Okay, I appreciate you guys are really cool. That's another thing I want to say. You guys are super nice. You guys are humble. You guys are. I've just seen it in the community thread. Lot of good vibes from the people in here, which we always have known we have good members, but it stuck out to me very clearly. You guys are awesome, understanding, really cool people. So thank you. All right, through the limited dissolve stuff, I think I've got everything. Sounds like your baby's cheering you on. Yay, Dad. That's a good way to look at it. Yeah, it makes me away from the annoyed side of I wish he would stop screaming during the stream. But yay, Dad. That's what he's saying. All right, so back to the handle. Now that I've got the geometry connected in there, that's a pretty important thing. You're going to often be cutting, removing faces, extruding, and then inserting them back in. And kind of, I think sewing is the better term for that. Essentially, we sewed this edge into this one. And that's a very common thing you do with polygon modeling, but it can take a little bit to get the hang of. Anyway, so let's try and get back on track with the coffee cup. We've got a very basic shape created. And if we go back and look at the handle, I just arbitrarily extruded this out. It's not a perfect shape. And so what I might want to do is I'm in wireframe view and I'm Alt-clicking, because remember that selects the entire edge loop. And I can move these around to be a little more uniform, a little more symmetrical in the up and down direction. So kind of create a better handle. And this, in general, like depending on the coffee cup, I feel like this is a little bit short for a coffee cup. So, I mean, this is very simple in edit mode. I can do it with edges. I'm in edge mode right now, and so you can see all of those are selected, and they automatically generate the face selection. You can go into vertex mode, whatever you're comfortable with, and select that with B box select. Okay, that is the B key, as in Boston. I don't know why that just came to my mind. So B, I'll click that, and then you get the crosshair, and then click and drag, as you might expect. That's your box select. And GZ to move that up, just to increase the height of our cup. And then also what I might do is just make the cup a little bit skinnier, the cup handle a little bit skinnier by selecting those verts and then moving them closer to the other ones. This creates a skinnier coffee cup. And now that I'm looking at it from the front, yeah, I think that'll be okay. That's fine. I mean, this is an example. Might not be the best coffee cup in the world, but at this point we have the generic shape of a coffee cup. However, it is super low polygon, which is good because it's easy to manipulate lower polygon models, but it doesn't look real, right? If we're going for a super low poly game, or if that's a specific style, I guess it works. But more often than not, you want this to look smooth, right? Because coffee cups are smooth. This would hurt to pick up, with these edges being so sharp. And so what we need to do is significantly increase that geometry so it smooths out. And this brings in Mr. Ed Catmull again, because we're going to be using his algorithm or formula to smooth out this geometry. And this is going to be a modifier. So we're going to go to the modifier stack, which is represented by the, the wrench. And I'm going to add subdivision surface. So click add modifier. At the bottom of the generate column, we have subdivision surface, more commonly referred to as a subsurf modifier. And as you can see, turning that on and off, we get more geometry, and the shape is smooth. It's averaged according to the base shape. And we can increase the number of subdivisions, and this will make it smoother and smoother. And at this point, we have a very smooth coffee cup, and that's how we get there. It's doing that for free. Like, it would be really tedious if I apply this modifier to create this much geometry, keep it this smooth by hand. To do that, manually, that would be crazy tedious. But it's very nice to be able to do that with a modifier, and I can turn it on and off. I can, even edit the low poly and see what it does, the high poly, the smooth version, real time in the viewport. So another awesome example of modifiers. But very commonly now, unless you're modeling for video games, you're going to be modeling for smooth, is what it's referred to as. You're modeling fully expecting the Subsurf modifier to be added at the end. And so that's how we're going to get our smooth coffee cup. But it works great for the handle. I think the handle looks good, finished. But we have some problems. If we look at the bottom, it's a little muddy. It's a little too smooth. It's not hard-edged like a normal coffee cup is. The same with the top. It's smooth a little too much. It's averaged too much to where the top edge looks kind of like a sharp edge, like a razor almost. And then inside, it's too round. Like, coffee cups are usually more cylindrical. They don't have this roundedness to it. And so this comes from the averaging effect of the Subsurf formula. And speaking of Subsurf formula, let me talk about a little bit about what exactly it's doing. If I tab into edit mode, and let's select this face right here, go back to object mode and apply the Subsurf modifier, go back into edit mode at this point, it has done one subdivision level, and that same face is now 4 faces. So that's what a subdivision modifier is doing, or subdivision algorithm. It's taking each face and dividing it into quadrants, and it's essentially quadrupling your poly count while averaging that new geometry according to the original shape. And so if we back out and jump up to 2 levels, we have now multiplied the poly count by 8. If I apply it, that same selection has 8 polygons now. By the way, anytime you want to see how many polygons or how many mesh elements you have selected in edit mode, at the top of your viewport, you have some statistics, verts, 25 out of 2096. So I've 25 verts selected, edges 40 selected, faces 16 selected, tries, and then your memory, your RAM. So some helpful statistics up there, but wait, why does it say 16 faces? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's, I'm sorry. It's 4 times 4. It's 16 faces. Good grief, my math. Sorry about that, but that's what subdivision surface is doing. That's how it's getting that extra geometry, and that's how it's averaging. And so what we can do if we step back is we can, using it as a modifier, we can adjust our underlying base mesh to compensate for the effect of the average. So a big spot that you're going to see this is the roundedness of the interior extrusion. All we have to do is cut a new edge loop. Remember, that's Control R, and drag it down toward the bottom, and that's going to give what's called a reinforcing edge to that geometry. And so it's less space for the average to occur. And when we add that subdivision surface, when we enable it again, it's much harder. Looking in our wireframe, you can see that it's not quite such a round average. It's a little harder. And so we're using this technique called holding edges. And we're going to do that at the top as well. We're going to bring some of that form back. And the closer that you get to the edge, the sharper it's going to be. The further away from the edge, the smoother it's going to be. So I'm going to put it right about there. Maybe cut one on the outside too. And then maybe put one in the middle. That's pretty common for me. Let's see what that does, how sharp everything is now. I think that looks pretty good. That looks like a coffee cup, or the coffee cup I'm imagining at least. So yeah, I've gotten to the point of adding holding edges, and this is a crucial technique for polygon modeling. Holding edges are absolutely important, because if you're modeling anything to match its real life counterpart, everything in life has a smoothness, has a subsurf added to it. Even a razor's edge, if you zoom in at a molecular level, I mean, the molecules are so small compared to that edge, it's going to be round. Like, the molecules are going to appear round. So everything in life, it has a roundness to it. And so in the computer, we have to do that. Now, in video games, you do low poly to fake the look of the high poly just for optimization reasons. But in general, you're always modeling for smooth. And so this idea of holding edges becomes crucial. Like, I need to add one down here, and you can see in real time what that does. As I drag it closer, it's getting tighter and tighter and tighter. I'm going to pull it up because I don't want it to be razor sharp. But yeah, holding edges are super important. And then on this bottom face, we haven't really done anything with that. So what I'm going to do is the same thing as the top. I'm going to inset it. And if I inset at a short distance, that's a technique to essentially create another holding edge for the bottom side of the coffee cup. So inset once, and then I can inset again. And I'm going to move this up a little bit, because most of my coffee cups kind of do that thing where it's like a dome upwards on the bottom side. And now we can see that looks pretty good. Our coffee cup, once we start adding these holding edges, and it starts looking better and better. It brings up another topic, though. Now that we're starting to get smooth geometry, we are still dealing with this faceting. I'm at 2 levels of subdivisions, which gives me 3,600 some faces. And I can keep subdividing up until I literally don't see that faceting anymore, but I'm at 6 subdivision levels. I'm at nearly 1 million, is that right? Yeah, nearly 1 million polygons. That's stupid. So it's too high. It's unnecessarily high. In the computer, we can do all kinds of magic. So let's go back down to 2. And by default, our models are set to have flat shading. But we can set it to be smooth shading. Over here in the tool panel, under the shading dropdown, under the shading section, you have smooth, and then you have flat. Flat is the default. Smooth kind of mimics that smoothness. It fakes that for us. So we can, if I'm looking at this coffee cup from here, it looks like it's been subdivided 6 times. Compared to being flat, it's clearly not that smooth. So often you're going, in general, you want to have a smooth shading. that's kind of, anytime you're using subdivision surface, you're going to be doing smooth shading. You're going to want to turn that on. And at this point, we have a pretty decent coffee cup. I might want to, since I started so low poly, I might want to increase the subdivisions to 3 if I were to render this, for example, because at 3, I feel pretty good that you would never see a flat face, and a flat face would ruin the illusion of it being like a real coffee cup. I see the chat just going by. Let me look through here, take a break from the modeling, and ask about, or see if I'm missing any good questions. Okay, yeah, we can do that later. Okay, we've got Pierico saying limited dissolve is used for cleaning in very specific cases, meaning based on an angle difference or so, you would be able to dissolve a vert. Yes, and I still can't quite envision a scenario where I would use that, but it's probably something I need to learn. I mean, if it's in there, it's useful. I just don't know why. So that's kind of on me. Any more questions? Let me just, oh, whoops, 1 second. Yikes, what's happening? Chrome is like frozen on me. Is my stream out? No? Okay, sorry. I cannot scroll up in, okay, there we go. Okay, glad you brought that up. Oh, where am I? Here we go. Page reloaded. I'm sorry about that. How long is the stream going on for today? I have to run to a meeting. So I'm going to be going, it's already been an hour, really? I'm planning on going at least an hour and a half. I want to get through the second part of the demo. If you have to bail, that's totally fine. This is going to be recorded and added to past streams, and I'll make sure to link to that in the community thread. So no problem if you have to bail. Just a heads up, the viewer's a little hard to tell the difference between streaming in lower quality, but if you enable smooth shading yourself in Blender, you will definitely notice the difference. Thank you, Sean, for that. I didn't even consider, if you're not watching the stream in HD, you're probably not, sorry, 1 second, I gotta stop this. I'm gonna stop my stream from playing back. So yeah, I would recommend trying to watch it on HD. That's the only way you're gonna see everything that I'm doing in Blender, but if you're watching on lower quality, you might not see, especially the difference between the smooth shading and the flat shading. Thank you for mentioning that, Sean. And then any other questions? Does the subdivision work on models that has geometry other than quads? Let's see, oh yeah, absolutely. If you're talking about if it works on triangles, certainly. Let me show you that. So in here, I believe this is what you're asking about. Currently, another big topic with mesh modeling is I'm using all quads except for 2 major n-gons, because this was created as a cylinder, and I'm going to go over that here pretty soon. But pretty much everything that everything you see now is definitely quads, and it goes back to that factor of 2. When everything is quads, you get the best smoothed result. And as soon as you start adding odd numbers in there, you start adding a triangle, that's where things can get a little funky. So if I simply create a triangle out of this face right here, I mean, it looks okay. If you need to be watching in HD to see this, but if you look really closely, let's see, I can make this a little bit easier. Turn on matte cap. Let's do something shiny. Something shinier. Okay, there you go. So watch the highlight on this matte cap right in the middle where I added that triangle. You see how, whoops, you see how it's wobbly? It's just ever so slightly wobbly in there. That's because it's trying to smooth a triangle, a couple triangles. So let's turn that off. If we look, let's apply that and then look at the wireframe. See what it did? It does work on non-quads. It works on n-gons, the subdivision, I mean. It works on n-gons, it works on triangles. But look what it has to do to the geometry. All of a sudden, you know, your edge loops are all busted. Like, look at that. That's the consecutive edge loop. It's no longer just going around the coffee cup. It's going every which way. So subdivision can do that, but it's not ideal. Quads is ideal. Quads is what you always want to strive for. And it's not too difficult to keep everything quads in a shape like this, or in simple, you know, man-made hard surface kind of things. That's not really, let's see if limited dissolve Okay, well I just used limited dissolve there, and I don't know why that worked better than like dissolve edges, but it did work. It did something. When you get to organic models, you're not going to be able to keep this really grid-like structure. You're going to have to make some concessions and make some weird geometry, but that's why you always, if you know anything, if you've been around modeling at all, you hear discussion about triangles versus quads and how quads are, you know, like the holy grail of pure polygon modeling. But I'm going to tell you, triangles and n-gons are not the devil or anything like that. So speaking of n-gons, we do have a couple. Remember that the initial cylinder created this big n-gon. An n-gon means it's a face, it's a single face, but it has more than 4 vertices with that face. So here we're looking at 14, yeah, I should have guessed that, 14 verts. And so what that does, if we go back to the subdivision surface modifier, and while I'm on the subdivision surface, there's a hotkey for this, which I didn't figure out till much later in my Blender career, but holding control and then hitting one of the number keys at the top of your keyboard, like Control 2, that will automatically add a subsurface modifier with a view count of 2. And then I can hit Control 4, and you'll see that jumps up to 4. So the number is the number of views that you want. And then Control 0 will turn it off, essentially. It's still there, it's just disabling it and setting the views to 0. But that's kind of handy. I really like that when I figured out that hotkey. So Control 2, we're adding that subdivision surface again. I'm going to apply it and take a look at what it does to the n-gon. Creates this snowflake-like shape, but at the center is a ton of triangles, and it creates these diamond junctions, which are these guys right here. Essentially, it's taking one vertex and spanning it out, stretching it out to be 3 vertices. It still keeps all quads. That's a quad. Everything around it is a quad. Note that actually, anytime you use a subdivision surface modifier on any object with quads, n-gons, triangles, whatever, the result will be all quads. Okay, that's kind of a cool thing to know. But the measure it took, that the formula took to get to all quads, makes for some funky geometry, as you can see with this n-gon. And if we look at the smooth version, it's very noticeable. That shape is very noticeable, and simply adding more subdivisions does not solve it. That's always going to be there. And so n-gons in this case is not ideal. It's not ideal for this situation. And in general, n-gons are maybe rarely used. That's kind of a rule of thumb. But what I need to do is inset again. Let's create another holding edge. And then finally, I'm going to X to remove this face. I'm going to select the edge loop and hit spacebar. There's a really cool tool called Grid Fill. I'm just going to type in grid by hitting spacebar. I'm not really looking in the menu anymore, though. Let's see. Maybe it's in edges. Nope. What about faces? Grid fill. Okay, there it is right there. Sweet. Found it in the menu. Let's hit that. And that's going to be smart enough to automatically detect. It has to be an even number of vertices to work. And this has an even number. And it automatically detects how to fill that in a grid-like fashion. So that's very clean geometry. That's going to give us a better result, especially if I maybe inset it one more time. Whoops, not inset. Instead of inset, so I'm going to do extrude, E to extrude, right-click to cancel any transformation, and then scale down. So that's different from inset, because inset only tries to move the outside vertices, or outside edge. So that's why I used E to extrude, and then just S to scale. All right, so now that should be really clean and perfectly smoothed at the bottom once we enable, yeah, much better. Look how clean that is at the bottom. I mean, I would say that it's perfect. Similarly, at the bottom of here, even though this is the bottom of the coffee cup, wait, why is it? Oh yeah, it's the bottom of the coffee cup, so it doesn't really matter. You're not probably going to see it. Let's do the same thing. Let's remove those faces. I wonder if I can just use grid fill without deleting the face. No. Okay, so you need to remove the face first and then do grid fill. And yeah, that looks better. Awesome. So this is a coffee cup. congrats, we were able to model a coffee cup, which actually teaches you a lot about polygon modeling. I hope you guys have gotten that from the coffee cup, even though you probably don't have dreams and 3D aspirations to be the best coffee cup modeler in the world. I would love for you guys to try it on the coffee cup. Please give that a shot because it teaches you a lot of core things. Let me see if I'm missing any questions. You can access grid fill with the Control F. Thank you for that, Pierico. So in edit mode, that's a menu or that's an option I don't use and probably should enough. I should say that each component has a specials menu, like devoted to those components. Control E brings up your edges, like your edge specific tools. Control W is not what I was looking for. Control F is your faces. And then maybe there aren't really vertex tools. No? Control V. Huh. I didn't think it would do Control V since that's paste. You know, Control C, Control V. I guess you can't... Okay, this is just... I'm curious. If I hit Control C on this face and then Control V... Okay, so yeah, in edit mode, the Control V hotkey, it overwrites the paste, even though I can still paste it. No, I can't paste it. I guess you can't Control copy in edit mode. I didn't know that. I thought you could. Anyway, Control V, all that to say, Control V is the vertex specific tools. There's an add-on called Mesh Lint. It became my go-to modeling Nazi. Yeah, absolutely. Mesh Lint is a great tool. I don't know if it's included with the default Blender. Let's check. Add-ons. Mesh. No, it doesn't seem to be. Mesh Lint is a really good tool. It will try to identify bad geometry. Like, for example, when I was talking about connecting the faces in here, like if we had this face filled, that's bad geometry. You'll be able to tell because it doesn't smooth properly. You can see how different that is. But like Mesh Lint is an add-on that would identify that face as being a problem. So that can be a good tool to train you in what is good topology versus bad topology. Yeah, so we've got a coffee cup, a very generic coffee cup. And so once you do this, I hope that you are either following along now or you will practice this later. Try and give it a little extra flair. Once you have the default shape, try and, you know, like give it a little extra. So I've seen this in coffee cups before, where you can flare out the edge, sort of like this. Although it's usually a tighter edge. Something like that. Yeah, I mean, just start to get familiar with these tools and give it a little something extra. Maybe flare out the top edge. Alt-clicking to select the edge ring. And then let's select both of those and just scale them out. Whoops, not that much. Yeah, start to give it a little extra is all I keep saying. Let's see, I'm trying to think of other tools that will be very important to you. Mesh or edge slide is another important one. So by clicking an edge loop and hitting G twice, you're going to slide the edge, okay? And it's going to go from either edge loop that's on another side. And this only works with concentric edge loops. If I had a triangle in here, I could no longer do the edge loop, or it wouldn't slide the way I would expect. So another reason to keep all quads and keep concentric edge loops as a theme in your model. But yeah, I mean, come in here and try and add some extra flair. Like right in here, I'm going to add a sharper edge. And yeah, and have fun with the coffee cup. Trying to think of some other tools. The bevel tool, very important. I'm going to go to edge mode for this, but bevel is Control B. So if I've got these edges selected and hit bevel, Control B, it's going to, at default, split each edge into two. And so now I've got these kind of stripes going along the side. And you can change that to be however many segments you want. It can split that one edge into however many. but it's going to be at least 2. And then once I do that, I can hit E to extrude and cancel the transformation with my right click. And then another important tool is Alt-S, which is to push those faces out along the normal. Okay, so I'm just going to bring that out a little bit, and I've got some fun little stripes built into the cup. So again, that Alt-S, let's see, if you want to push it out relatively, and it's along what's called its normal direction, select these edges, Alt-S. Play around with that and get used to its behavior because you're going to use it a lot. Alt-S, super important. If I wanted to, another practical example, if I wanted to thicken up the coffee handle, Alt-S, that'll give me a big one. Yeah, so our coffee cup is developing a little more personality, a little more flair. Why am I all about that word? Can we make a bottomless cup of coffee? You totally could, because this is Blender, and I've said many times that you can do anything. You can create the illusion that it is a bottomless cup of coffee. You absolutely can. Easier than you could in reality. Let's see if there's any other questions I'm missing. Thanks. I'm seeing people answer each other, and that's a big help to me. I love that this seems to be a popular stream. How many we have on right now? 46 are watching, I believe. Yeah, that's pretty great. That's awesome for a stream. And it'd be hard for me to keep up with by myself, but thank you for helping each other out. Anything else? Control V only works in panels for numbers, I think. I thought you could control copy. Yeah, you see it says in object mode, copy selected objects to buffer, Control V. So yeah, you can copy and paste in object mode. You can even copy, if I had another Blender window open, I could copy from this Blender window, go into the other one, and then paste it into the other 3D viewport. So it's pretty cool, the copy and paste feature. I was just surprised that I couldn't do it in edit mode. So yeah, I don't know, that was unexpected, but I've never needed to do that in edit mode. Shift D, yeah, someone mentioned in the chat that just Shift D is a little bit easier for that. Duplicate. Any other tools that I need to tell you about? One of them is, an important one is proportional editing, and that will bring a little more organic, artistic feel to it, rather than being so rigid and geometric. So if I wanted to splay out the bottom of this coffee cup, give it a little more body towards the bottom side, not be perfectly cylindrical, I can enable proportional editing down here with the with this little circle icon in between the magnet and the component selection. And let's just do enabled. There's a couple different types, and enabled will allow me to scale everything with a fall off. So you can see that it's soft. In Maya, it's called soft selection. And I can constrain it if I wanted to just stretch it out in every direction except up and down. So like hit S and then Shift Z. That way I'm scaling in all axes except up and down. And that'll splay out the bottom. Maybe I can, let's see. Maybe I can do the opposite. Why is that? Okay, there we go. Just box select these faces and then scale them inward. I hit Shift select, Shift, I'm sorry. S for scale, and then Shift Z to scale in every direction except up and down. And there we go. We have an interesting shape to the coffee cup. So that's called proportional editing, and it's pretty awesome. It allows us to be soft with what we're moving, you know, kind of as if it were clay, you know, grabbing and pulling it up that way. So enabled, if I give an explanation real quick about that, enabled will select it kind of, you see this circle as I start to move it, that's the fall off influence. And I think anywhere within that circle, it will start to move the mesh. But if I change it to connected, then I need to do this in a better way. Let me go ahead and add a UV circle in here. A UV sphere. Okay, so by the way, you can go to that same add menu and add that sphere in edit mode, not only in object mode. That's pretty cool. So let's say I've got a piece of this mesh that's separated from the rest of it. In regular enabled proportional editing, it will move that disconnected sphere as well. But if I go to connected, it will, or I mean, if I go to, yeah, just connected, it only affects the geometry that's connected directly. It ignores that sphere. That's kind of the difference there. I've never used projected 2D screen space locations. Let's see if there, what is the difference with that? I honestly don't know. I've never used 2D projected. I feel like it's new within the last few versions of Blender. Well, maybe last couple years. But I've never used it. So that's proportional editing. I do use that a lot. It's a pretty great tool. I've kind of gone a long time on this first demonstration, but hopefully this was a good overview of mesh modeling and some of the core tools. I would love for you to practice on the coffee cup. I think that's a good model to start with. And from there, like pick a couple other models that are challenging to you to actually do as homework. Let me see about if there's any questions I'm missing. Maybe an important topic for transforms is the origin point. Yes, and I covered that a little bit in the first class, but it wasn't very good. So I'm gonna do that in the next part of the demonstration, which is doing the modifier, the tire. I'm gonna talk about origins there. So yeah, that's a good point to bring up. Looking through the chat now, since there's no faces where the handle connects, how would filling up the cup work? Since there's no faces where the handle connects, that must have been a little while ago. Being funny. I appreciate that. Can we make a... Okay, yeah, so I think I've seen everything. From Ryan, in edit mode under the shading tool tab, you can smooth by vertex, edge, or face individually. How does that differ from just setting the object smooth shading? Can you use that to set hard edges with a subsurf, for example? Yes, let me think. Yeah, I bet that's a good topic. I think that's a good thing to cover. I'm thinking through that. Let me just answer. Yeah, I don't want to confuse people, but so with the computer, you can, in addition to adding holding edges, which is what you've seen, what we've done so far, you know, cutting a new piece of geometry up here, that will tighten up that edge. You can also do a technique that hardens the edge automatically. So if I select this edge and hit Control, you were asking about, where was it? Shading. Okay, so smooth, sharp the edges. Yeah. So what that's going to do is it's going to tell this particular edge to look sharp, to appear sharp. Now it's not actually adding any holding edges. It's just, you know, doing a computer trickery thing. And so with that sharp edge, I never do this, and I'll explain why, but I think now if I add an edge split modifier, nuts. I don't recommend modeling this way, and I'll tell you why. I thought, why? Do I need to make the crease something? Okay, maybe this is the deal. So back in edit mode, I've got these edges selected, and the mean crease, that's what it is. Okay, no, it does. Sorry, I'm trying to, let me test this out real quick. It's pretty slow. Is it that? Yeah, okay. Basically what I'm trying to do is I'm telling this edge to appear very sharp without holding edges. So if I bump that all the way up to 1, make sure I have those edges selected, bump the mean crease up to 1. So now it looks super sharp right there. And what that's doing is it's just tricking the computer to display that as being sharp instead of soft. And it requires this edge split modifier, as far as I know. Let me see if anyone else will say that. Matt is asking, can you show how to take a screenshot of your wireframe? Yeah, sure. I can. Yeah, definitely we can do that. Wait, screenshot of wireframe overshaded. Yeah, sure. But the reason I don't like to use this method, I like to add a holding edge if I want to make that sharp. Yeah, I'm gonna clear sharp. Control E, clear sharp, and remove the edge split. Okay, so the reason I like to add a holding edge is because if I needed to export this model to another program, the holding edges will mean the model will look exactly the same in another app. If I build a model based on the edge split and this creasing business, then it only works in Blender. I'm unaware of a way to export those creases. And so I don't recommend modeling that way. I recommend adding holding edges just in case you needed to export. If you're doing freelance, believe it or not, the world doesn't really expect Blender to be used necessarily. So sometimes you need to create in Blender if that's what you use and export from Maya. And holding edges is going to be important for that. All right, so I think that's going to finish up. I've already been an hour and a half. And that's going to finish up the first part of the demonstration. Next part, we're going to look at how to create the tire, and that's going to be particularly applicable if you want to do the exercise on CG Cookie, the wheel modeling exercise. This is going to be very helpful. All right, let me see if I'm missing anything. Ryan Butler, crease versus sharp. Crease versus sharp. Okay, so with that, you can see that this edge highlighted pink. Hold on a second. Yeah, okay, edge crease. I'm confusing myself. I never use these tools. I've already said I don't recommend it. So there's several tools devoted to that, and I just never use them. So I'm a little inadequate to explain it. But the way I understood it is you mark a seam sharp. I think I do have those confused. Let's try down here. Let's say I want to make this edge sharp. Thanks for the explanation on creasing. I feel like it was a bad explanation, so I'm sorry for that. Okay, wait. I think sharp is referencing shading, while creasing is referencing making the edge appear creased in subsurface. I think that's right. Edge crease is not related to this modifier. Okay, maybe I got that backwards. So I guess I'm gonna have to say I don't know the edge creasing stuff. I thought I knew it well enough to explain. I just never use it, but I don't. So I'm gonna have to come back. Maybe I can talk about that next time, or in another stream. But practically, I don't see a reason to use it, and so I don't know. It's maybe to me not really worth taking the time for it. For you is what I'm saying. But anyway, let's go on to the next part of the demonstration for the modifiers and building that wheel. All right, so I think I'll just start from scratch. Let's just delete this guy. All right, so this whole demonstration is meant to give you a feel for modifiers, how to work with them, and most importantly, how you're gonna have to change your perspective and how you think about modeling. Like with that coffee cup, it was pretty straightforward. Other than the subsurface modifier, we are creating everything manually. But with this wheel, everything's going to be very dependent on the modifiers. And so you have to think that way. You sort of have to think in the future, so to speak, or you have to see your model for what it is, but also for what it's going to be, both at the same time. And so we're going to start, and this is a little bit tutorial-y, meaning following my steps is important, and yeah, just pay attention to the steps. They're kind of important to this. So I'm going to start with, it doesn't really matter. Let's just do a cube. Okay, yeah, this does matter. So I'm starting with a cube, and I want to think about what the modifiers are going to be that I'm using. So anytime I think I'll use a mirror modifier to get symmetry, like if I'm, and that's for many things, that if I'm modeling a character, if I'm modeling this mouse I've already used, like you can imagine a line of symmetry down the middle right here because this mouse, yeah, it is symmetrical. And so think about, and if I'm going to do that, like I will for this model, I'm going to tab into edit mode and immediately delete half of it. So Control R to cut an edge loop right down the center. And if I've started sliding, I can just cancel that by right clicking and it'll end up directly in the center. And then delete these vertices, Control X, delete the verts, and that leaves me with half a model. So that's an example of me thinking ahead for the modifiers that I'm going to be using. And then remember, we are basically modeling a tiny cross section of the wheel. And so I need to scale this down in the X direction. Yeah, the X, let's see, actually, no, I'm wrong. So I cut the symmetry wrong. I don't want symmetry in the Y axis. I want symmetry in the X axis. Just out of habit, I recommend doing that because the mirror modifier defaults to symmetry in the X axis. And that's just easier to assume that that's going to be the case rather than having to change it manually to Y. That's just kind of, what do you call it? Just good habit to get into, I guess. And so let me undo that, get back to where I had a full cube. And let's cut the center down the Y axis, remove that. Okay. And so now I'm going to focus on the cross section. Let's get to that cross section. I'm going to start this way, make a very skinny cross section like this. And then I just need to delete these verts right here to leave me with an L shape like this. Okay. That's going to be the cross section starting off. Maybe I'll bevel this edge right here. Control B. Let's move this up. It doesn't need to be that far down. And since I saw that circle, that means I'm still using proportional editing. Let's turn that off. Okay. So this is how I'm going to start with the cross section. The next thing to think about is the shape I will conform to. That's actually the first thing I need to think about is adding the array modifier. So let's add that. And so by default, the relative offset is set to be in the X direction, meaning if I increase the count, you can see it's duplicating but in the wrong direction. And the numbers down here under relative offset, the first one represents X, so let's turn that to 0. Second one is set to Y, let's turn it to 1. The reason I'm using 1 is because it's using 1. If I slowly pump this up above 1, you'll see there's a gap between each duplication, and then if I go below 1, it starts to overlap, and you can't see that until I go into wireframe. You can see that they're overlapping. So 1 means it's going to place each duplicate directly beside each other. And so we've got the array modifier. The count is arbitrary. Let's just, I don't know, let's start with 25. You can go as high as you need, but that's arbitrary for now until I get the next piece of the modifier puzzle, which is the shape we want to conform to, which is our circle. So Shift A, let's go to curve and just choose circle right here. And then as soon as I do that, before I move anything, I want to use this align to view option in the add Bezier the tools. But remember, if I move the circle or rotate it, those tools will disappear. So I'm going to look in the side view. And now once I'm here in the right orthographic view, I can choose align to view. And that's how I want my wheel to be oriented. Okay, so with that created, let's apply it by selecting our actual tire mesh that we're working on and add a curve deform. So under the deform column, let's choose curve. And it'll show red, meaning that it's missing a piece that it needs to work properly, and that is the curve. So we can either choose from a list of objects, and we only have one other object in the scene, so it's going to be that one. Bezier circle. And there we go. It's we're duplicating it around the circle. The shape is now conformed. That's awesome. But we're getting intersections. This means we have too many, this means a couple things. Maybe we have too many array duplicates. We have, maybe this geometry is a little too big and I can start scaling it down to match the tire. Or alternatively, I can scale the tire up, or the circle up. So several options, and this is important. Well, I guess it really doesn't matter which one you want to choose for this particular situation. I'm just going to scale up the circle till the tire looks to be about as big as I want it. I think that's good. And then I can just simply increase the array count and go up by 1 until I basically connect. Now, once I get close to the connection down here, I'm just going to scale that circle a little bit till it basically matches up. Now, it's not going to actually connect until I apply the modifiers and weld the that's what it's called in other apps, but merge those verts. There's going to be a gap there, but it's really not going to be noticeable by the time we get to the end. And so I just want to basically touch those so that it completes the circle. And is there anything else that I was missing? Looking in the chat, seeing if there's anything that I'm missing. Don't want to ignore you guys. Oh, okay, Ryan, you said I'll figure it out and get back to you next time. Yeah, I would actually appreciate you telling me like what the difference is between the crease and sharp stuff, because I'm a little ignorant when it comes to that. Anyone have a strange feeling of watching a tutorial, but now you can reach in? I hope you're referring to the stream, the fact that it's, live. But that's cool. I'm glad you have that feeling. Let's see, I'm reading Sean's thing. It was saying that the mirror modifier default is set to X, so assume that this will be the case in modeling. It's good to learn your best practices since I'm used to working in 2D animation. I'm only used to X and Y, and to me Y is up and not down. Is Y and up and down, not like Z. My brain keeps exploding whenever I have to decide which way to orient a 3D object. Okay, so I'm glad it's helpful to learn. That is weird. I remember coming from Maya where Y is up in Maya and Z is back and forth. So I don't know why there's not a standardization across the 3D apps, but for some reason Blender, it's Z is up. And I think in 3ds Max, Z is up as well. All right, so we've got the tire started. And there's one more modifier that I want to add, and that is mirror. So we got a mirror modifier, and that's simply going to... Oh, wait, I used that on the circle. That's not where I wanted to add the mirror modifier. I want to mirror it this way. Hold on 1 second, guys. My other kid is awake now. Let me just close the door real quick. All right. That's real life. Speaking of reaching in. All right, so the mirror modifier, that's the next in the stack, and that's just simply giving me the other side for free. And then the last one is going to be the subsurface modifier. You already know what that does, but I'm not quite to the point where I want to use that yet. So we've got the structure set up, and now we are ready to actually build in the details, right? We've got a basic structure, and but this won't really work for any practical model. It's just a beginning base mesh. So let's think about, well, that's something. So now that I've got the modifier set up, we have a huge disconnect between what we see in object mode and what we see in edit mode. When I just jumped into edit mode, I'm sure beginners are like, whoa, 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 how are those the same thing? And it brings up this topic of how you can display in the viewport. So in our options, we have, in the modifier options, we have, is this modifier going to be rendered, which is the camera. And then we have, is it viewable in the viewport? And then we have, do we see the effect of the modifier in edit mode? Now the array modifier, we see that effect because it's enabled. And then if we click this, it gives us the visualization as though we can edit all of our array modifiers. Now, all it's doing is is multiplying the visualization. And so if I click on any vertex, no matter where down the line, it's actually just clicking the original one. And you can move all of those at the same time. But we can do that for any of the modifiers, and I can enable all of these so that we're seeing, it's a very clear visualization from object to edit mode. The problem with this is if I wanted, well, this can also be confusing because I can forget, wait, which one was my original? Is it this one? No, I can't remember which one my original is. And let's say if I wanted to move this face in a particular, this vertex in a particular direction, I have to remember that I have to remember what it was originally. Does that make sense? Like the transforms are not, how do I say this? Blender is not looking at edit mode as if this face is actually oriented at this angle, okay? When I make any operations, it's only looking at this, okay? So that's what I'm talking about with kind of learning to see both the base mesh and the end result all at the same time, okay? When I want to, for example, if I want to shrink the size of this circle right here, I might, when I look at it like this, I might think, oh, let's do scale, okay? Oh, but that's not what I expected it to do. It's simply scaling the edge down. It's not doing this. And what's confusing is to do that, we turn off the modifiers, I'm actually simply moving that edge down in Z. And that can be cumbersome to work with. So I'm literally, if I want to have these modifiers viewable, I need to see this and understand where I want to go. But how to get there is in my head, remembering that this is the base shape. So that can be a little weird. But the more you work with modifiers, the easier it will be for that kind of thing. So let's, and it's up to you if your preference is like, I want to see this in edit mode and then tab to object mode and see the final. That's absolutely valid. You can do that so that when you tab into edit mode, you edit this way. I want to bring this down. I want to, let's see, bevel this, and it makes sense to make those changes in edit mode like this, tab into object mode, and then be like, okay, that's how it ends up. All right, I want to make another change, go back down to the sliver. I tend to work that way more times than not, you know, just develop a comfortability for yourself. Ryan's asking, can you have an original object off to the side somewhere, modified independently to your array? I thought I saw you do that in a hair card tutorial or something. Yes, yeah, you could do that. Let me think. You basically, yeah, you could. So here's an example. If I duplicated this object in object mode, crap, there's a problem. So I'm moving this in Y, but you'll see that it's not actually moving. It's kind of rotating around the wheel. I'm trying to think how I would do that. I'm not sure this is a situation that really I could do it that way. You can toggle the cage on the modifier, 3 little vertex, yeah. Oh, is that it? No, I'm sorry. I duplicated. I forgot that. Nuts. You called me on the spot, and I'm kind of brain farting, trying to remember how to create the tire, trying to remember that workflow. And sometimes I'm realizing as a streamer, I can trip myself up trying to answer one of these other questions. Alt-D is linked duplicate. Yeah. So I was thinking I could Alt-D and just move this off to the side. I guess I could maybe in the X direction. Maybe, yeah, I can do it in the X direction. I can't do it in the Y direction. It gets all funky in the Y direction because it's dependent on this circle object. So you can see kind of how the relationships are affecting each other. But okay, you're right. I can duplicate it in the X direction, and it's a linked duplicate. In case you didn't see me do that, we're getting into some topics that are a little maybe deeper. But Alt-D, moving in X, that creates a duplicate linked. And it means that these are two separate objects, but it contains the same object data. So the object data is found here. That's a little bit confusing, but think of objects as a container for its underlying object data. And in this case, like they're sharing the same. You can see it has a little 2 here. This means this object data is shared by 2 objects. And so because of that, I can tab into edit mode and I can make changes, but it actually won't update over here until I enter edit and go back to object mode. So yeah, that plan actually backfired. I thought it would update automatically, but it doesn't do that until I go to object mode. So yeah, all that to say, no, you in this particular situation, it worked with the hair cards, but in this particular situation, I can't seem to duplicate the object, look at that one as a final result, and then just model on the edit mode of the original. So sorry about that. That would be pretty cool. Maybe there is a way. I just am not thinking of it off the top of my head. Main stage pressure leads to rapid brain overload. It does kind of, yeah. I just need to get used to it. I haven't been streaming that long, but you know, I need to tell myself if the demo is not the most important thing, if the questions are going to be the most helpful thing, I need to figure out how to understand answering the questions is more important than doing the demo. Anyway, hopefully the demo is relevant. So I'm gonna finish it up because that was, I guess, the plan. I'm gonna try and finish in the next 15 minutes. And so yeah, I have the base shape of the tire, and now I want to get a more finalized version, a prettier version of the tire with tread and details like that. So first thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna choose to just to have a variety, I'm going to actually enable the modifiers and try working a little bit like that, looking at the final result, but thinking in my head of what the base mesh actually is, that little sliver. And I know that I need to move back in X because I want the tire to be widest up at the outer edge. And so I'm going to move it like that. I'm going to extrude and move it in the X direction to give a little thickness to the tire. And then E, and then Z, because I'm going to move it up. Remember, the sliver is oriented up and down, and that's going to give me the effect of, you know, stretching out that inner circle. So that's kind of the effect of the tire that I'm after. And then I'm going to extrude this interior. E to extrude that. I'm just going to pull it down. And I'm just trying to give it like a rim, okay? So let's try scaling it in X. Maybe extrude one more time. Scale that in X. I'm sorry. Yeah, in X. All right, so now this creates a bit of a rim. Okay, that's the interior of the tire. And at this point, maybe we're ready to consider the tread. The tread actually is easier for me to do with edit mode, or with the modifiers turned off in edit mode. So I'm just going to turn them off completely. No, I'm just going to turn off their display ability in edit mode. And this does reveal a problem. With those extrusions, I've got these faces that will actually be duplicated all the way around, and that's bad geometry. Remember, this is a cross section, so let's get rid of the faces like that. I'm going to have to remember to do that anytime I extrude this way. So with the tread, let's think about how we can do this. I'm first going to inset to give myself a little gap. Remember that this gap is going to be duplicated onto the other side as well. So when you do the inset tool, keep that in mind, and maybe I want that to be a little bit thinner for the gap between the tread to be thinner. And so I've inset. I also, let me undo that. With the inset option, before I go on to something else, I want to enable, wait a minute. Never mind. Thought there was an, never mind. Forget that. So I've inset, and I want to get rid of this face. and move this all the way to be even on the horizon of symmetry. And the way I can do that is going back to our snapping. In edit mode, we can snap just like we can in object mode. So with vertex enabled, vertex snapping, G, X, and then hold Control, I can snap it directly in line with our other verts. So now this whole thing will be duplicated with the mirror modifier onto the other side. So I've inset to give myself a little bit of a gap, but I'm going to Alt-M to merge these last verts together here. Alt-M at last, Alt-M. And the option for at last is I choose this one first, this one second, means I want to connect this vert over to this one. That's like the weld kind of functionality, combining these into one. Okay, so I'm doing that. And now I want to extrude the tread up. So E, and I'm just going to go straight up with it along the Z axis. I'm not going to extrude it too terribly much, something like that. And also I'm going to combine just like I did, Alt-M, combine at last, okay? Remember I extruded, so I want to get rid of that face. I don't want that duplicated all the way around the circumference. All right, so that's what I've done in edit mode, kind of visualizing what's going to be in the end. Now when I go to object mode, we can see what that gives us. And we've got a bit of tread started. And at this point, I think I want to see what that tread looks like smoothed. So let's add a subdivision surface modifier. Let's crank it up to 2. And also set the shading to be smoothed, all the faces to be smoothed. All right, so we're on our way. Maybe I can add, it's not a decorative, but an edge inside here, jumping into edit mode and turning off Subsurf, or turning off all of them. All of my modifiers are turned off in edit mode. So I'm going to add an edge and then move that in X, kind of give this lip. And then also what I've seen in tires before is to give sort of an S curve. Okay, it's going to give a little more interesting shape than being straight. And now if we go to object mode, you can see what that does for us. Though we still see this faceting around our array, and I think there's an option in there that okay, yeah, by default it's off. If I turned on merge, it will merge the vertices between that are connected, that are side by side in the array modifier. And yeah, so we've got a little bit more interesting shape. And then the last thing I want to do with this tire is create some breakup in the tread. And I'm going to create 2 edge loops, Control R. And by the way, when you're doing Control R, before you cut the pink line, you can mouse wheel up and down to determine how many cuts you're going to make. So I want to make 2 here, and then just right click to cancel any sliding. And the way I'm going to create this tread is simply by offsetting these edges. I'm going to move this one a little bit to the left in X, and then move this one a little bit to the left in X, the opposite direction, like this. Okay, so now we've got this offset face that, let's see, I'm going to cut another edge on either side, and let's just delete these faces so that this can be its own sort of extrusion upward. I don't need to delete those. Yeah, just the one selected. And we can fill. There we go. And now when we look at that smoothed, we've got more of a tread feel to it. And that looks pretty cool. Some important things that little notes about that technique that I just did is you'll notice that I left this vert and its corresponding vert over here. I left those in the same place as the original edge cut because that way I know that they will merge properly when used with the array. If I were to offset these like this, or maybe to show that a little, yeah, well, let's just do it that way. You can see that they're no longer merging And so that's why I wanted to keep those consistent. And you know, from here, if these are a little bit too soft, maybe I can add an edge loop like this on either side. Add some holding edges. There we go. It's much tighter now. So we've got this tire started. And looks like this is what I wanted to show you. This will help you a lot on the the wheel modeling exercise because it's a fairly complex thing to put together with modifiers, but it teaches you a lot about them. And then from here, you know, the process, if I wanted to move this wheel, because remember this wheel's location is dependent on the object that we are conforming to, that circle. So if I were to move the wheel, you know, it's not doing what I expected. It's just going funky. So I need to parent this object to the wheel, or maybe the wheel. Let me see. Let's try both. Brings up this idea of parenting. If I parent the wheel, the circle to the wheel object, that's fine. Now I can move the wheel. No, it's still pretty funky. So I need to go the opposite direction. Let's undo that parenting. Let's parent the wheel to the circle. Control P, object. And now to move the whole thing is just to move that circle. Okay, so I could parent this circle. If I'm thinking of building a car, for example, I could parent this circle to a bone, and I can animate this model. Even though it's all based on modifiers, my point is that you can maintain that, and it's completely non-destructive, which is awesome. At any point, if I wanted to adjust this wheel, I can just go in and adjust that particular cross section. That's super powerful, and then I get the whole wheel for free. Alternatively, I can apply the whole thing. If I wanted to add specific detail, I might remove the subsurface and apply each of these modifiers starting from the bottom, or I can fast track that by going to Object, Convert to, and choose Mesh. And that will essentially flatten or collapse our modifier stack. And now we've got all of this as an individual mesh. And then from here, maybe I can go in and model like Firestone tires or something to give it localized detail. So that's kind of what you can do. You can leave it as a modifier stack, and you know, there's pros and cons to that, or you can apply it, and there's pros and cons to either way. But so something I've learned from the last 2 streams is when I have a very specific thing I want to teach, it gets harder over time to like stay focused. And I want to be able to stay focused, but also teach and answer you guys' questions. So I need to work on that. I need to figure out how to do that a little bit better. But I've largely been ignoring the chat for the last few minutes. Let's see if there's anything I can answer. If you guys have any questions for me, please let me know in the next few minutes. I'll be happy to answer them. The magician's secrets have been exploited. Thank you. Okay, maybe that means you learned something, which I'm happy about. Creating a tire is black magic. This is a pretty powerful example of modifiers. Not all of them are that powerful. You know, more practically, the mirror modifier and the subsurf is the one I use for a lot of models. But if I don't see any questions, don't hesitate at all to ask in the community thread. Again, I'm checking that every day, especially Monday through Thursday. I'm checking multiple times a day. On the weekend, last weekend I checked once or twice a day. But I'm going to be in there. Hopefully the experienced people, you'll still continue to ask questions. I look forward to seeing homework from you this week, because now we're kind of, you know, again, we're leaving the Shire and we're on our way, hopefully not to Mordor, to a bad place, but to just a wide open world that of modeling that we've not experienced so far. So yeah, I don't see any questions coming through. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for participating in the class. I am thoroughly enjoying it. My hunch is that this is going to be the best way to learn through CG Cookie, and seeing you guys so active, seeing that many homework submissions gives me hope that that is true. And we're not requiring our members just to learn by themselves anymore, but together and therefore create better students and more lasting education. Holes in mesh. Thank you, Paul. Yes, I did want to cover that. I appreciate that. Scott, a little bit of encouragement that always goes a long way. Holes in the mesh. Yeah. Specifically, I think earlier you mentioned, and another one from Matt, you mentioned for like rivets or something like that. So I wanted to show you what my approach would be. Let's do this with a cube. I'm going to subdivide it a few times. This is another tool. I don't use that often, but if I need more geometry, but I don't want it to smooth an average, I'll just, in edit mode, there's a tool called subdivide, and I can do that a couple times, and it will subdivide the mesh, but leave the original shape. It's not averaging. Okay, so let's say if I wanted to add like holes in this mesh for rivets in the corner, that's how I'm interpreting your question. Like what I do, I simply, inset like a square, inset that down, and then inset one more time, add a holding edge on both sides. So when I add a subdivision surface modifier, that's going to give me a very defined, I hope this is what you're asking about, in terms of rivets, but that's going to give you a very smooth rivet object. I'm sorry, a hole in the mesh, which I think is what you were talking about. And specifically, since we're talking about modifiers, what we could do, let's get rid of that, add a mirror modifier in both the X and Y direction above the subsurf, and ta-da, we get them for free, all 4 of them. But like that's as simple as what I'll do, and then maybe put like a nut model in the middle of that. I guess you don't need to have a nut. You can do it like this. That's kind of how I'll model, a simple rivet in geometry. Is that what you were talking about? Please let me know. Boolean modifier, that's another good one to cut holes in mesh. I'm still trying to figure out exactly where is the reminder? Oh, what Paul means, holes in a mesh. Asking about punching all the way through. Okay, so if you're talking about punching all the way through, let's see here. I mean, let's see, I would, if I'm thinking about punching all the way through, let's do the same process basically. E to extrude again. Oops. And then if I get to the origin of symmetry, the horizon of symmetry, snapping right there, X, remove that face, it's going to punch that hole all the way through. And that, that's how you can get a hole there. Seeing some very nice comments. People are learning stuff. They learned stuff today. That's awesome. Paul, let me know if that answers your question. I feel like it's too simple, so I must be missing something. But yeah, let me know about that. And then there was something else I missed. Matt was saying, this week's exercise says take a screenshot, of your wireframe overshaded. Sure. How to do that. So in Blender, if I wanted to visualize this model and its wireframe, I'm going to go to the object. Is this the object properties? Yeah. And under display, you can choose wire. And sometimes that can look weird. You can see missing wireframe, and I don't know why that's the case, but just enable draw all edges, and that will show everything. Additionally, this is the subdivided version, so you see all of the high-res geometry. If you want to smooth it, I recommend not doing that full thing, not doing the full wireframe, but you can tell it to enable this optimal display, and that's going to show a smooth version of the low poly wireframe, if that makes sense. So this kind of gives me a better picture of what you guys are, what your wireframes are looking like, which that is what I'm going to look at. I'm going to look at the quality of your wireframes. And while I'm thinking about that, I mentioned the bevel tool, but I did not maybe mention it in one of its primary uses. So if I wanted to bevel this edge, like make it smooth, I can hit Control B and it will average, you know, it'll round over that edge, but also I can tell it how many to give it. That's kind of what the bevel is primarily built for, not necessarily just simply multiplying an edge into multiple like I used it. So anyway, that's a very powerful thing about bevel. It's easy to be distracted sometimes. So yeah, so that, okay, now once you have the wireframe, whatever OS you're on, I'm on Mac, so I would just hit Shift-Command-4, you know, take a screenshot, post it. It doesn't have to be more complex than that. If you wanted to take like a viewport render, I mean, you really don't, let's not get into that. Don't worry about that. Just take a screenshot of what you see in the viewport. Simple as that. Not exactly what I need, but I will give you something to work with. Oh, okay. Or it will give you something to work with. Paul, if you, I mean, feel free to like post, if you can somehow give me more context in text, like post on the community thread, give me a model even and tell me what you're trying to do with it. And I'll be happy to like take some screenshots of how I would go about it. But I'm sorry that I didn't get to answer it. Didn't answer it perfectly. Bummer. The rest will speak through the thread. Thanks a lot. Awesome. Thank you guys. I really appreciate you being here. I won't take any more of your time, but have a great rest of your Tuesday. I will see you in the community thread, and goodbye.